World Cup's over. You know what that means. It's time to make a tier list. So I'm going to rank all the teams and how they did at this World Cup. This is all personal. If you dislike it, that's your judgment. But I'm just going to go through and rank them how, in my opinion, they did this World Cup. If they were abysmal, disappointing, as expected, good, had a great World Cup, and the best. Starting off, we got Saudi Arabia. I'm going to put them in as expected. Everybody expected them to pretty much not get out of their group for the most part. So, kind of just there. This is kind of what I'm basing it off of. Obviously, many people would say they were abysmal, but it was as expected that they were going to go out in the group stage. So, they went out. Argentina, I think they'll have a good World Cup. I don't think they'll be happy with how they played. They got dominated in the final. They had a good stroke of luck throughout this entire tournament where they were able to pull themselves out of sticky situations. But looking back on this World Cup, I think they would not say it was the greatest World Cup they've ever played. They didn't play like they did 4 years prior. They looked disjointed. They looked gettable. They were just relying on big moments from big players, and it all kind of crumbled at the end of the World Cup at the final. So I think for them, it's just good, in my opinion. They didn't have a great World Cup, even though they did get to the final. Australia had a great World Cup. They had a great World Cup. They got out of their group, and well, a group that many did not expect. They had the U.S., Paraguay, and Turkey in it. Really tough group for them. And they were able to get out of it and get to the round of 16, where they got out of their group. They lost only on 1-1 to Egypt in pens. So I think for them, that is a good showing. I think they had a great World Cup. That can give them momentum to go forward for them. Austria. I think Austria had a good World Cup, in my opinion. They got out of their group. And unfortunately, they had Spain in the round of 32, where they got pretty much brushed aside, but they still played pretty well in their group stage. They got out, which was looking to be a tough group with Cape Verde playing as well as they did. So I think they had a good World Cup. Actually, I'm going to move it down to as expected. I think I many expected them not to get past the round of 32. So yeah, they were just expected. Belgium, I think, were very disappointing this World Cup. They played not to their standards. They were lucky almost to get out of their group. I think if other results had gone other ways, they would have gone home. So they are lucky in that assessment. I think their entire front line, besides Charles de Ketelaere, wasn't doing much. De Bruyne was showing his age. Lukaku was basically just an impact sub. Courtois was pretty good. He had a couple mistakes, one of them leading to a goal that almost got them eliminated. Actually, no, it did get them eliminated. It was against Spain. The back line was a bit all over the place. So they were just, as a collective, kind of disappointing. And hopefully they're able to kind of reset for the Euros and in 4 years for the next World Cup. I'm pretty sure this is Bosnia. For Bosnia, I think they had a great World Cup. They scraped through qualification. Edin carried them on a platter, or carried them on his shoulders to get to this World Cup. They fought hard to really get out of their group, and they got to the round of 32. I can't remember if it was for the first time ever and for the first time in forever, but they had a great World Cup. They showed determination. I think that'll be a great kind of moment for them and help promote the game more in Bosnia and Herzegovina to maybe find that next generation of players, young players who get into the sport and will able to get through to the national team, hopefully. For Brazil, disappointing, in my opinion. Uh, I almost want to put them in abysmal, but they did get to the round of 16. I mean, even if they did get to the round of 16, should I put them in abysmal? Because they played Japan and almost lost. If Japan just hadn't decided not to play at the end of round of 16, they could have lost. Norway beat them pretty handedly. I'm gonna put them in disappointing. They still their group stage got off to a slow start, but they were able to get out at top. Japan, they didn't look their best, but they fought hard. Norway was, like we said, really pretty disappointing showing. Cape Verde, I think, had a great World Cup. I think going into this World Cup, they had zero expectations for them from their fans, maybe from themselves, from the world pretty much. Everyone expected, hey, it's their first World Cup. They're a tiny nation. Their group has Uruguay, Spain, and Saudi Arabia. They're probably going to get grouped, going to go out with Saudi Arabia. They might maybe get one of the best third place teams, but they said, no, we're going to go through second and we're actually going to play well. We're going to make a huge run, almost beat Argentina. We're going to take Argentina all the way to penalties, fight really hard, show the world that we are a great nation at football. And they won the hearts of pretty much most of the world, in my opinion, maybe besides Argentina fans, but they were excellent at this World Cup. And I think, even though many of their players were old, like Vozinha, I think it should be inspiring to that tiny nation. And hopefully we'll see them again at the next World Cup because they were pretty much a joy to watch for many, including me. I loved watching them. For Canada, I think Canada still say they had a good World Cup. They got to the round of 16 and then got spanked in the round of 16. But I think for them, I think it was a target to get to the round of 16. Like many of the host nations, I think the target was always get to the round of 16 and then go from there. So they achieved their objective. They'll say it was good. They had a kind of tough group with the Swiss in it, but they still got out, got to the round of 16, and they had pretty tough conditions because they did have quite a few injuries that uh, had an impact on the team. Like Alphonso Davies wasn't fit for a long period of this tournament, so with him, maybe they would have gotten past the round of 16. Who knows? Colombia. I think Colombia were disappointing. Even though they got to the round of 16, I think this team should have gone to the semis or the quarterfinals with the talent they had. I think losing to Switzerland in this round of 16 is disappointing from them. Uh, there's not much more to say. I think I think they should have been shooting higher. They were just losing steam, I think, as soon as the knockouts started. They barely scraped through against Ghana. Switzerland was just they couldn't get anything done. Their group stage, they looked good. In qualifying, they looked good. I don't know if it's just like something with like the traveling or the heat or whatnot just got to them and they just petered out. But I think they'll be disappointed. I think they're going to be raring to go for the Copa America and whatnot and just hopefully go again. But maybe in 4 years' time, we'll see a new look Colombia and maybe then go for a farther run this time. Dr. Congo, the Democratic Republic of Congo. I think they had a good World Cup. They were one of the few nations, or actually one of pretty much all the nations of Africa to get out of the group stage and then pretty much lose it in the last 10 minutes or so of normal time against another team. They almost beat England, so I think for them, they'll be proud of themselves. They got out of their group, had to unfortunately face England pretty early on, and if it wasn't for a couple defensive mistakes right at the end, they, I think, could have made it to the round of 16, which would have been historic for them. So I think they can hold their heads high, be happy with how they did, and maybe see how they do at the AFCON in a couple years' time. Cote d'Ivoire, I think, will be as expected. Like DR Congo, they got out of their group and then kind of fumbled it in the round of 32, but I don't think many expected them to get past the round of 32. So could have been better, could have been worse. I think the same thing as DR Congo. They'll look ahead now to the AFCON and see if they can build off the momentum they started here at this World Cup. I want to say Croatia were abysmal almost, but I'm gonna put them in abysmal. I think they were pretty bad in this World Cup. Actually, no, I'm gonna put them disappointing. They had their group was not the easiest. They had England in it. I think they also had Ghana and Panama in it. But besides that point, they should have been better. I think against Portugal they played awful. So losing a bunch of their older players, their more experienced players, going out like this in a World Cup will be disappointing for them. Uh, Unfortunately, they did get Portugal in the round of 32, but you got to beat who you play. So yeah, it was disappointing for them. Curacao, as expected. I'll be honest. If anybody expected them to get out of their group, they are pretty crazy. I wouldn't know who would say that,
Curacao
but
or Ecuador?
I
I
think
think Ecuador
many
third.
didn't
Ecuador come third.
expect many didn't expect them to probably get far or out of their group, but they had vibes. They showed who they were. Tiny little nation similar to Cape Verde, but they played their heart out. They got pretty far, and they did get a point at this World Cup. So for them, I think that was pretty good for them. The Czech Republic, I think, were abysmal. They had a group where they should have at least gotten out of it. Maybe not in the top two, but at least out of it. They had Mexico, South Korea, and South Africa in it, and they just blew everything out. I think they didn't even get a point. Actually, I lied. They got 1 point, which was a draw. Either way, they were bad in this World Cup. The level of talent they have on that team should have at least gotten more. They should have at least gotten a win against South Africa, at least, who were pretty bad in the start of the World Cup run. South Korea was pretty bad, so they should have at least beat them. Mexico obviously were flying high in that group stage, so they probably wouldn't have beat them, but they should have at least tried to. They were just, I think, had a bad showing. I don't know if they were just had bad coaching or whatnot, or their players just didn't show up, but they will be not looking back on that World Cup at all, based on how they performed. Ecuador, I think they'll say it was a good World Cup by their standards. They had a tough group with Germany, Ivory Coast, and Curacao, and they were able to be one of the better third place teams. They got out of their group, fought hard too, and unfortunately they did get lost 2-0 to Mexico in the round of 32. But I think they'll say it was a good World Cup. Many probably didn't think they would get out of their group as one of the best third place teams. I thought maybe some of the other teams in other groups that just missed out, like South Korea, who we'll talk about later, could have been one of those teams. But for them, getting to the round of 32 probably was their goal. And they, I think, overachieved with how they were playing. So I think for them, it was a good World Cup. Same thing as all the other South Africa. Why do I keep saying South Africa? South America teams. I think they'll probably be looking ahead and hoping to build off the momentum they built here, or reset if they played badly to go to the Copa America and see what they can do. Egypt, I think, had a great World Cup. Unfortunately, they kind of got scammed by Argentina. But either way, great World Cup. Many of those players showed a lot of heart. I think they deserved the way they were playing to get to the quarters. So I think they were really good. I think they were probably, besides Morocco, the best team out of Africa this World Cup, and they showed why. They are the team with the most AFCON trophies, and they played like it. They didn't blow teams out of the water. They just fought hard. They took it to them. They took it to Argentina for at least that majority of that game. They were 2-0 up at one point. If it wasn't for Argentina just finding magic out of nothing and scoring 3 right at the end, they maybe could have gone to pens and or even just gone to the semis, which would have been historic for them. But yeah, they had a great World Cup, and I think their coach and nation will be happy of how the players played. For England, they were disappointing. I know they got third place, but look at this bracket. They had to get who they played. They played the DR Congo, almost lost. Played Mexico. They almost came back and won. Norway, they got lucky and had to have Bellingham rescue them. Argentina, they got kind of obliterated by at the end there, thanks to how they just completely just stopped attacking at the end. And then I think the third place match is the only one that I think they can be happy on how they played. That was a very disappointing match. Uh, that was a very disappointing World Cup, I think, in my opinion, on how they played and just were. I think that entire side of the bracket was just super easy. I think the hardest team, let me go back here, that they would have had to expect to play against was maybe Brazil, I guess Norway on how they were playing in Argentina. Three teams on the entire left or right side here that they could have been worried about playing. Versus they were on their left. They almost pretty much every team on this side, maybe bar Bosnia and Austria, and maybe Canada and the South African team. Like those, besides like those four or so, I think everybody on the left could have potentially beaten England with how they were playing. They looked awful up until the bronze match, which I think if they played like they had in that bronze match throughout the tournament, I don't think anyone would have been complaining that they unfortunately went out to Argentina, but they were just very disappointing. I think they should have played so much better with the talent they have. I think they just have to find a coach. I don't think Thomas Tuchel can be that coach that just lets them play like how they played in the third place tournament. I think he's just too pragmatic, too just weak to make a team that goes out and wins by multiple goals. They're just every single tournament, this English team somehow just disappoints with how they play. I don't get it. I think it's just I don't know if it's a mental thing, lack of belief, or just the pressure about piles up, but who knows? France, I think in the same way they are disappointed by how they got knocked out in the semis by Spain. I think they probably expected to at least get to the final. I think that was their goal going into this tournament. They obviously didn't get that. They got knocked out by the eventual winners. But then in the third place match, they still got shellacked in that first half. If it wasn't for Mbappe just playing like a man coming out of hell, just having point to prove, I think they would have probably got embarrassed in that game. I think up until the Spain game, they had maybe one tough game, and that was Paraguay, because Paraguay was just super defensive and resilient. But they should have at least played better against Spain. I think they're just going to be disappointed that they got knocked out. I think a little reprieve that it was the eventual winners. So you can always say that, oh, we just lost to the eventual winners. What can you say? They were just better on that day. But I think overall they are disappointed on how that World Cup ended, because they at least should have gotten to the final with their attack and that midfield line. They should have at least gone farther. For Germany, I'm going to say it was abysmal. I'm going to say it was abysmal. They should have never lost to Paraguay. They started out hot, scoring 7 against Curacao. They got out of their group pretty easily. I think they had a easy-ish group. Like I said earlier, they had Ivory Coast and Ecuador, like were the other two teams. They brushed them aside, and then they got out of the round of, got to the round of 32 and immediately lost to a Paraguay team who had one trick up their sleeve, and that was just to frustrate opponents, be really gritty, play just pure South America, North American football, where it's just fighting pretty much tooth and nail to like get a draw or just get a foul and just make it tough, make it gritty. And they lost. They couldn't handle it, and that's just abysmal. You should at least be getting past the round of 32 with this team. If they had gotten past there to face France, which I think they should have at least gotten to France, they should have maybe taken it to France. Maybe if they'd played a different team than Paraguay, we'll say something else, but they were abysmal for not being able to get past the round of 32 with that talent pool they have. And it's just another wasted World Cup for many of those players. For Ghana, I think it'll be expected. They got out of their group, they got to the round of 32, and then lost to Colombia. I think that's usually the playbook for the Ghana. They get out of their group, they go out pretty quickly, or at least not get out of the group. So for them, it was a good year. They got out of their group and then just went out. So run of the road, run of the mill for them. Haiti, I think were pretty bad. I think for Haiti, yeah, it was pretty bad. Well, unfortunately, they had Brazil, Morocco, and Scotland in their group, but they still showed no like heart at all. So they were pretty disappointing, in my opinion, to not at least attempt something. They could have gotten at least a point against Scotland. So, but getting scored 8 goals on and only getting 2 goals that entire tournament is pretty bad for them, unfortunately. But maybe they can go again at the next World Cup and hopefully get an easier group. The Iranian side, I think, will be disappointed. I think there was just so many factors playing against them, both in the World Cup and outside the World Cup, that were just making it almost impossible for them to play, have a fair chance at this World Cup through the extra travel that they had to do, through kind of just getting unlucky with their scoring, not having all their coaches there, not having as much rest because they had to immediately leave after every game, making it hard for them to cool down. I think they kind of let themselves down on the pitch too. There was a couple points that they dropped. They got to 3 draws, and one of them against, I think it was Belgium. Yeah, the game against Belgium that they drew was great for them, great result. And then not getting a win against the other 2 teams in their group, New Zealand and Egypt, I think is a chance that they will rue. Getting 3 draws is pretty good for them. Unfortunately, they needed at least 4 points to get out of the group and get into the round of 32. So it's a bit disappointing based on their group. They should have at least had a chance to get to the round of 32. So, yeah. Iraq, abysmal. They didn't do much, I'll be honest. Like Haiti, they had a pretty tough group with Norway, Senegal, and France, so they had a pretty tough group, but they didn't fight at all. They were just there to be the punching bag for literally all 3 of those teams, and they'll be happy, I think, to play against 3 of the best teams in the world, or 3 of the biggest at least, but I don't think there's anything that they can talk about that was good for the most part besides that at this World Cup. Japan, I think, will be disappointed. They fired their coach going into this World Cup, and then their coach got him out of their group, and they immediately went out to Brazil in unceremonious fashion. They just played awful in that second half, and they're going to be disappointed. That's a team that many were expecting to go pretty far for being an underdog. I expect them to go to the final. They went out in the round of 32, which I'm upset about. I think their fans are probably disappointed. I think the players themselves are disappointed. Yeah, they had a few injuries, especially to Endo and Mitoma, who are their captain and arguably one of their better attackers. So not having both of them is a big miss and was a hit for that team. But they still have quite a few people who could have stepped up for that team, and they just didn't. I think they were scared against Brazil, and it showed, and that's why I think they went out, which is really disappointing for them. Jordan, abysmal. Not much to say. They got beat up, similar to Iraq. Every single team came to them and just was their punching bag. For Mexico, I think they had a great World Cup. I might be putting them a tier too high, but I think for them, getting to the quarterfinals is great for them. They had a pretty tough group, and they topped it easily. Nobody expected them to play like they did. They played amazing, got 3 out of 3 wins. They beat Ecuador in the round of 32, got to the round of 16, and then unfortunately they could not find that last goal against England and went out. But I think still the way they did play, I think they should be proud. I think they had a great World Cup. I think the round of 16, like all the other nations who were hosting, like I said, were shooting for that. But I think they just played great, and I think they should be proud of how they played. That youngster, that 17-year-old, I think Gilberto Mora, I think is his name. I think he'll be a starlet for that national team going forward. And getting your first World Cup at 17 is a huge boost for them. So if they can build a team around him, I think they'll be set in 4 years' time to maybe go farther than the round of 16. Morocco, I think they had a good World Cup. Actually, I think they had a great World Cup. They got to the quarterfinals and then lost to France. So for them, I think that was a good World Cup, or a great World Cup actually. I think if they had maybe weren't so scared against France, they could have maybe beat them. They barely had any shots, I think, if I remember that against that game, and it took until the second half for France to get to both of their goals. So, but for them, I think they'll be looking ahead to the next AFCON, build off of the momentum they had. They looked pretty good throughout this tournament. I think they just came up against a France team that was too strong. But either way, I think they had a great World Cup. The Netherlands, I think it was expected for them. Actually, no. Disappointing. Actually, no. Abysmal. They should have. This is national team for the Netherlands should never be going out in the round of 32, and that is arguably why they're going in that category. Yeah, they lost to Morocco, but still, the way they lost to Morocco on pens through a awful penalty shootout, I think, is the reason why they're going home. They have such good attackers, and they had no reason to be going out on pens then. So, yeah, they're abysmal. New Zealand. But New Zealand is in as expected. They were not going to get out of their group. But still got a couple points. Unfortunately, bottomed it, but they were just there, having fun, you know. The Norwegian team here had a great World Cup. They were such an underdog that nobody expected them to get as far as they did, taking it to Brazil, beating Brazil, taking it to England, and unfortunately losing due to some dark arts in the form of wires off in the air, knocking balls down. But they had a great World Cup. I think they'll be happy. They can probably take this momentum or just that good feeling and vibes to the Euros, or I guess the Nations League is up next for them, and see if they can go far in that. Panama, I think they were as expected. No one expected them to get out of their group. They fought hard to just be there and became a punching bag for everybody. Paraguay, I think, had a good World Cup. I think beating Germany will be a highlight for many of those players and their fans. They had a great heart. I think against France, they showed a lot of determination, like I said earlier, and they'll be happy on how far they got. And I think they can't be mad. They can't be mad at all on how far they got. I think many were expecting them to maybe not even get out of their group, but they did and got to around a 16, which is huge for them. Portugal, I think, as expected. I want to say as disappointing, but they faced Spain, so I guess round of 16 is kind of where they were shooting for the most part. But like that midfield, no, it's disappointing. That midfield they had should have at least carried them farther. Vitinha and Nuno Mendes and who's that other midfielder? I can't remember off the top of my head. I don't think it's Nuno Mendes. Whoever the other kid is that's next to him, I can't remember off the top of my head. But those two should have been playing so much better in the midfield, especially against Spain. They played awful. They looked lost. It's super disappointing on how they play. They should have been at least going farther than the round of 16 with that team. Qatar, like always, they were abysmal, rock bottom. Not much else to say. Saudi Arabia, as expected, they were going to get grouped no matter what. I think everyone saw that. Scotland, I think they will be disappointed. They had a shot to get out of that group after the first day. and they blew it. They had to at least draw, I think, against Brazil or something like that. Draw or at least win. Win, I think you would have gotten out. Draw, you would have had to face the third place teams, but I think they would have gone out with 4 points. But they lost pretty badly to Brazil, and I think they're going to be disappointed. They had a good shot to at least get into the round of 32. Senegal. I think Senegal were disappointing. I think they had a bad tournament. I think getting the round of 32, facing against a Belgian side that was not doing too hot, and then getting 3 scored on them will. I think they were actually abysmal. They were awful in the group stage. Yeah, they were awful in the group stage. They got 1 win. They lost to Norway. They lost to France really badly. They only won against Haiti, I think it was in the group. No, sorry, Iraq. Yeah, Iraq was basically there to be the punching bag for them to get out of the group at least. If it wasn't for Iraq in that group, they probably would be going home. They scored. They had to score so many goals against Iraq to bump up their goal difference to stay in this game or in this tournament. And if it wasn't for Iraq, like I said, they'd be going home. So yeah, that's why they're abysmal. They played awful this tournament. I think what we saw in the AFCON a couple years prior was not in this World Cup team at all. They had nothing going for them. Their team looked old. They looked tired, and it showed on the field. I think South Africa had a great World Cup. Going into it, many expected them not to get out of their group. They showed everybody up and played amazingly. That first game, they got red card. They lost pretty badly to Mexico, and then they turned it around and won both of the next 2 games. It's one of them against South Korea, and they went on to get out of their group, which is amazing. They almost beat Canada in the round of 32, which if they had, I think would have been historic for them. I can't remember if it was their first time they had ever gotten to the knockouts before or not. But either way, I think they had a great World Cup, and maybe in the AFCON they can do another surprise run like they did here at this World Cup. South Korea were abysmal. There's not much to say. They lost pretty much every game that they shouldn't have lost. Against Mexico, they should have at least had a draw. They should have beaten South Africa. If it wasn't for the Czech being really bad, they would have probably rock bottomed that group with how they were playing. They launched an investigation against their coach because he was, I can't remember if they just launched it because he was so bad and trying to figure out what went wrong or whatnot. But either way, that was an abysmal World Cup against them, which many had expected to get out of their group and maybe get to the round of 32, maybe the 16. Spain were the best. That's the only team that would probably be up there. I want to put Cape Verde up there for what they did, but the best has to be the best. Sweden. I think Sweden had a good World Cup. I think what many expected out of them was not what they showed. They overachieved based off of how they got into this World Cup. They didn't get through the World Cup through conventional means. They were rock bottom in their qualifying group. They just got through because the Nations League for the UEFA spots, the winner got, or something, I can't remember what it was, how they did it, but through the Nations League, they got into the World Cup, and they performed pretty well. Unfortunately, they overachieved, in my opinion. They played pretty well on the field, but they were overachieving so highly that I think for them, they'll say it was a good World Cup for them. They got out of the group at least, so maybe they can help build on the momentum for either, I guess, the next Nations League or in 4 years' time. Switzerland, I want to put them in as expected because they're just always the team that makes it far, just being good. But I think for them, it was a good World Cup. They lost to Argentina, unfortunately, very late on. If it wasn't for Embolo putting on a audition for the World Cup Olympics diving team, they potentially could have beaten Argentina. But for them, besides that, I think they'll say it was a good World Cup. They got to the round of the quarterfinals. Yeah, getting there, I think, was pretty good for them. Even though pretty much they always get there at every World Cup. Tunisia! Awful. They are the worst team, I think, at this World Cup. I don't understand how they got as far as they did. based on how they were playing. They looked awful. They fired their coach after one game and then got scored on a boatload the next game. I don't know what happened to this team that had made it out of the African qualifying group. They just terrible, 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 terrible. Turkey, I think, were also in the same boat. They looked pretty bad throughout this entire group. Many expected them to at least either top or get second to the U.S., and they didn't do that at all. They lost to both Australia and Paraguay, two teams that they should be beating with that talent pool, and then winning against a heavily rotated USA side, which they had almost lost to. But they'll be probably writing that one off as not happening and looking ahead to the next tournament for them. Uruguay are also going to go in the abysmal category. They should have gotten out of their group. Unfortunately, if they had, they probably would have been the ones facing Argentina. But either way, they cannot be saying that they deserve to be out of their group with what they said or with how they played. They could not win at all. If I remember, they tied against Cape Verde 2-2. They lost to Spain. They drew to Saudi Arabia, which is a team they should be beating. They should have at least gotten second place out of this group. It's unfortunate. They have such a good, fair group, like core group of players like Valverde, Nunez. They have a center back who's also pretty good for them. So like they have a fair amount of players that are good, that they should have carried them through. I think the U.S. will have had a disappointing World Cup. I think they were expected to get to the round of 16 no matter what. And then just to play, like, I think the way they played at the end of that, the end of their run against Belgium, I think is just disappointing. They should have at least played better. Obviously, all the outside noise around the Balogun red card being overturned and whatnot, and everyone just kind of dogpiling on that national team definitely didn't help. They had a lot of outside noise kind of giving them more pressure and kind of unsettling them. So unfortunate, but I think it's still just disappointing for them. And I think they will kind of rue what they did. I think they should have at least gotten to the quarterfinals with that talent pool. Lastly is Uzbekistan, who, oh yeah, they lost pretty much every game. I think those are going as expected for me. I don't think they were expected to do much. I think it was their first World Cup in forever, or it was their first World Cup. I can't remember off the top of my head, but they came rock bottom. Everyone expected them to come rock bottom. Their group had Colombia, DR Congo, Portugal. Speaking of Portugal, I forgot one more thing that throw them disappointing is that they did not top their group. Colombia came top on their group, so yeah, that is yeah. In fact, I'm actually going to move Colombia up for topping their group. That they'll go into as expected for me. They weren't disappointed. They topped their group. So yeah, Uzbekistan. Yeah, they're expected not to get out of their group. They pretty much were set in stone. They're going to get rock bottom. This is the final tier list. If you had disagreements, leave them in the comments. I'm sure many people will also have tier lists of their own. So if you could leave a like, maybe tell me who you thought was your surprise or just unexpected player in this World Cup. Maybe tell me who you think was the worst in this World Cup down below.